Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast in association with MMA Play 365. I'm your host as always, Newsome, but tonight unfortunately John is away on holiday with the family, so in his place is my guest host Andrew. Now most of you will likely know Andrew as MMA Knockout Bets over on Twitter, a good dude, a good handicapper, and here to break down UFC on ESPN Plus 12 from Greenville, South Carolina. So Andrew, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to breaking down this card with you.
The pleasure's all mine, man. Now, I'm ready and raring to go after the week break, even though it wasn't really a week break because we had Bellator 222, but this is going to be a fun card in Greenville, and I'm really looking forward to breaking it down. But before we start, I just want to mention MMA Play 365. For those that follow me on social media, you'll have seen a lot of teasers coming through lately. So MMA Play 365 is a brand new betting advice platform that is officially launching in July next month. We have a solid team behind the platform, which we believe is unique and provides subscribers with a lot more than what your usual tout delivers, and also what I used to deliver under the betting segment of Newsome MMA. As I've already alluded to, this is a subscription-based platform, but one that is absolutely affordable for everybody. Even though the pricing is more than fair, we're going to be opening up with an amazing offer for the first 1,000 people to subscribe to MMA Play 365. So whether you're a serious long-term gambler or just a huge fan of MMA that likes to bet for fun on the night, MMA Play 365 is absolutely for you. So keep your eyes out for the launch by following MMA Play 365 over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC Greenville, and we enter the Showtime Fights. The first Showtime fight tonight is in the main event of the evening, and what a main event it is too. We've got Renato Moicano versus the Korean zombie, Chan Sung-young. Andrew, who have you got?
Well, this is an interesting fight to me because both these guys super talented. They both like to strike, and they're both coming off losses here, knockout losses. In Korean Zombie's case, he's coming off a brutal knockout loss, so it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that. I think there's a lot of unknowns in this fight because of that. And from a technical standpoint, one thing I noticed that Korean Zombie does that worries me against Moicano is he was kind of standing still a lot against Yair Rodriguez. And I think Moicano is the better boxer here, and I think his leg kicks will make a difference. So I favor Moicano in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you've just mentioned there, Andrew, as well, is Chan Sung-young, the Korean zombie, standing straight in front of Yair, which Yair did the exact same thing back to him. And I actually bet on Yair in that fight. You know, luckily cashed the underdog in that because he was down on the scorecards. I think some judges even had it 4-1 for the Korean zombie. For those that don't remember, it was 1 second away from the end of round 5 in that fight where Yair knocked Zombie out with a crazy back elbow as Zombie was coming in with a punch. And, you know, I was massively high on Yair that fight. I thought his movement was just going to be too elusive for the Korean zombie. I had questions about the ACL, the MCL injuries that Korean zombie had accrued the year before, and obviously had a lot of time off. I even spoke to a doctor that is in my circle of MMA network about the situation, and even he said that, you know, no fight will ever be the same after that. But I was really surprised with how Yair was stood in front of Zombie, which is exactly what Zombie needs in order to flourish in his fights. But then from the other side of the coin, you know, Zombie didn't look any different. He didn't look like he'd had a huge layoff or multiple layoffs over X amount of years. He didn't look like he was coming back from any injuries. So he really looked good against Yair, and it was a little surprising to me. Now, in this fight, you know, you've mentioned as well, Andrew, they're both coming off knockout losses. The Moicano loss to Aldo stings a little bit. I bet Moicano in that fight. The reason why it stings is because Moicano took that first round. He was using technique, he was using kicks, he was mixing in combinations against Aldo. He did edge that first round. You know, he didn't get into boxing range, he didn't get into the pocket and start trading. But then yet, when he went into the corner between the first round and the second round, his team said to him something along the lines of, you know, we've got him now. We've laid some hands on him. Let's get into the pocket and let's really get at him. And I was sat there with my buddy, and I was like, shit, man, he shouldn't be doing that. You know, obviously I'm not the professional, but he was doing well at range. But he listens to his corner, he gets in the pocket, and he gets finished by Aldo. So it was a little disappointing. But in this fight with the Korean zombie, I think that it's got all the makings to be a great fight. However, it depends on how Renato Moicano fights. If he fights like he did against Jeremy Stephens, I think that it could be a little duller than we think the fight may be. If he is fighting on the back foot, using movement and sticking his jab out there and really frustrating Zombie, I'm not sure which way it's going to go, whether we're going to see the Moicano that we saw against Calvin Kattar or the Moicano that we saw against Jeremy Stephens. It's going to be one or the other, but either way, I do favour Moicano. I think for anybody to beat the Korean Zombie, I think they need to use combinations, they need to have high volume, they need to mix in low kicks, and they need to have movement to get out the way of every time Zombie rushes forward and really tries to put it on their opponent. And I think that's what Renato Moicano's got. I think he is going to be able to use his movement, whether he's coming forwards or coming backwards, and he's got beautiful timing on his low kicks, which I mentioned in the last breakdown of the last podcast when he fought Yair. So I like Renato Moicano in this fight. I think that the way he loses is if he doesn't use too much movement, if he allows himself to get tagged, if he allows Zombie to close the difference without angling or exiting away from the cage. I think that's where Zombie will really flourish. So I like Moicano in this fight. I don't think he put Zombie away. It was a freak knockout from Yair. So the Korean Zombie is called the Korean Zombie for a reason, just because the dude's notoriously tough and hard to put away. I don't think Moicano does put him away, but I do think he puts on a 5-round clinic. So I've got Renato Moicano to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now, in your next Showtime fight is in the co-main event of the evening. It's actually a short notice fight as well. We've got John Lineker stepping in against Rob Font. Andrew, who have you got?
So these two fought already, and John Lineker pretty much got in Rob Font's face and won the striking battle for 3 rounds. I think one judge might have gave Font a round or 2, but Lineker pretty much controlled the fight. And this fight was in 2016, so about 3 years ago, almost exactly. They've both fought a few times since then. I think Rob Font has got better since then, but this is also a short notice fight, which you have to take into account. And I favor Lineker here. I don't think Rob Font has changed so drastically in his game that this fight's going to be super different the second time around.
Yeah, so I like this fight, man, and I think that there's a lot of people saying, why is this fight happening again? Lineker dominated the first fight, and well, first and foremost, Rob Font was supposed to fight Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann unfortunately had to pull out. That was a really good fight. So yeah, Stamann pulled out of that fight. Lineker was campaigning for another fight after the Sandhagen loss, so the UFC naturally just matched them back up so they could go at it again and rematch. And the other reason why I really like this fight in general anyway is because, yes, Lineker was dominant in the first fight and he did comfortably beat Rob Font, but Rob Font that was his 3rd fight in the UFC, and by far the biggest step up that he's had from one fight to the next. And Rob Font's improved since then as well, so he's got better. He's had plenty more fights in the UFC. He's been in there with some good guys as well, so plenty more experience. His skills have improved. However, I don't see this fight going too much different from the last fight, so I do think it'll be slightly more competitive from Rob Font's perspective, but I do see Lineker just constantly walking Font down, walking through his shots, putting it on him, body, head. Rob Font's a little bit shorter than what Sandhagen was, so Lineker has got that, I suppose, advantage, if you want to call it that, compared to what he had in his last fight. But the way you beat Lineker is exactly what Corey Sandhagen did against Lineker. You've got to be able to eat his shots. You can't be scared of him. You've got to be in Lineker's face as well. Land volume, land kicks, switch stances, mixing takedowns, getting the clinch. Corey Sandhagen fought almost the perfect fight of how he beat Lineker, and he still only just beat Lineker, And I just think I think Lineker is honestly like super underrated, and I'm not saying people don't rate him, because they absolutely do, but I even think he's better than what the people that rate him think that he is. And he's just such a tough guy to beat, and I don't see Rob Font putting that sort of performance what Corey Sandhagen put on against Lineker. And if he does, and if Rob Font does turn it up, I think it'll only be in moments. It'll only be sort of 30 seconds to a minute at a time, opposed to a round or 2 rounds or 15 minutes. I really struggle to see Font winning this fight unless he can get moving forward, because that's where Font really flourishes. He flourishes striking when he's moving forwards. He can strike moving backwards as well. I just don't think he's as good moving backwards as he is going forwards. But Lineker won't allow that again for long periods of time. Maybe for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe a minute. But Lineker is a fighter that's on the front foot. The second he feels that he's the one backing up and he's the one that's fighting defensively, he won't like it and he'll just move forward. He'll use his toughness to get through the shots and really start putting it on Rob Font. I think the combinations are going to be there, like I've already mentioned, to the body and head. The combinations what Lineker uses are really effective as well, because he starts throwing the combinations and changing the levels on the punches, and he does it in such a way where his opponents really don't know what's coming next, whether it's coming to the body or the head, so they're not sure whether to block low, block high, and it just causes a whole lot of confusion, and that's really where Lineker can hurt his opponents. I don't think Lineker puts him away again either. Well, not that he put him away last time. I just don't think he does put him away. I think he'll get another decision in this fight. But ultimately, I have to side with John Lineker, even though it's on short notice. I think, like I say, I think to beat him, you've got to replicate that Corey Sandhagen performance or that type of performance. And I don't think Rob Font's quite got that in his locker. So I'm taking John Lineker to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now, the final Showtime fight of the podcast. We've got Dan Ige versus Kevin Aguilar. Andrew, who have you got?
So this is a tough fight to call because it's almost a binary fight, striker versus grappler in a sense. Dan Ige being the grappler, he's got 5 submissions on his record. It's half of his fights. Kevin Aguilar's been on a tear lately. He's a Contender Series veteran. He had a dominant win over Rick Glenn, and then he beat Enrique Barzola. And I think Barzola and Ige are a little bit similar in the sense that they look for takedowns. And I thought Aguilar did a great job of stopping those takedowns. I do think Ige's submission grappling is a little better, though. So I think Aguilar has to survive that first round. And if he does give up a takedown, of getting right back to his feet and not letting Ige take the back, because Ige is a good fighter on the back. And I think that Aguilar has a pretty significant striking advantage here. So it's all depends if Aguilar could keep this on the feet or not. I could see either one of these guys finishing the fight. I think at the end of the day, I'm going with Aguilar.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting fight as well. And, you know, for previous listeners of the podcast, you will probably notice that I picked against Aguilar in both of his both of his UFC showings. I picked against him with Rick Glenn. You know, that was a bad pick. I picked against him in the Barzola fight as well. And, you know, I suppose that turned out to be a bad pick as well. But I just don't know what it is with Kevin Aguilar. I just can't seem to get excited about the guy. I mean, his striking is obviously his stand up and his striking is obviously his game, but I don't think he really sets the world alight with it. You know, he fights much better moving backwards than he does forward. So opposite to what I've just said with Rob Font in the last breakdown. And I just think when that's fine. It's fine to counter strike and move backwards because you know you've got guys like Lyoto Machida that's made a career out of it, and he's an ex-UFC champion. So it's not a bad thing fighting on the counter, but where it's really going to hurt you is when you're fighting against opponents that are needing to come forward, they need to close the distance and trying to take you down to the mat, which is exactly what Barzola tried to do, and it's exactly what Ige is going to try and do now. I feel that Aguilar did some really good stuff against Barzola, just first and foremost. That fight against Barzola, even though he was fighting on the counter, the second that he had a sniff that Barzola was going to try and close the distance and shoot in for a takedown, he stopped that entry by bursting forward, just gradually, just bursting forward, throwing a 1-2 and then moving back. And what that did, it was just halting Barzola's game, and it was making the entries really hard to manufacture from Barzola. And in turn, it just led Barzola to get a bit frustrated, and you could see in that first and second round, Barzola, he was just... It was on his mind. He was trying to find the entries, and Aguilar was doing a good job, like I've just mentioned, of bursting forward in moments. And I just feel that Barzola overly focused on trying to get the fight to the mat. And when he did shoot in, it was from a little further out because his entries weren't there. And Aguilar has got strong hips and he was able to defend the takedowns. And like I say, it made Barzola less active on the feet because he was just really zoning in on trying to get the entries for his takedowns. Now, what's interesting, and this is the reason why I think Aguilar can be got at on the feet as well, is Barzola isn't known for his striking, yet in that third round he completely ditched the idea of trying to take Aguilar down because it just wasn't there. And when he ditched that idea of trying to take him down, he really started to be able to strike well with Aguilar. Now, I said in that breakdown on that podcast anyway that I think Barzola's striking isn't as bad as what people think, but he was piecing Aguilar up in moments in that third round, and he actually won that third round on the feet. So this is what I mean with Aguilar and his striking. I'm just not totally sold on the guy yet. Now, the difference with Dan Ige to what we had with Barzola is Dan Ige doesn't hunt the takedowns. He will find his entries, he will be making reads on the fight, but he'll shoot opportunistically opposed to trying to overly manufacture the entry and trying to get the takedown and really pressing for it. And his striking is improving as well. So I think Ige, even though he might be at a slight striking disadvantage, I think Ige's striking is improving and it's good enough to hang with Aguilar, and I definitely think that he can strike with Aguilar. And when he draws Aguilar into a striking exchange and makes him forget about the potential takedown threat, that's when Ige's going to shoot in. That's when Ige's going to try and take him down. And we have seen it in previous fights with Kevin Aguilar in the Joey Gomez fight on the Contender Series. He can be taken down, but like I say, you've got to be really clever with your entries. You've got to really set the takedowns up well. You can't just shoot in naked on him because it's not going to happen. Aguilar can defend a takedown, and his takedown defense is decent. But I think, and a point you mentioned as well, Andrew, which is right, Ige's grappling and his submission grappling is much better than Barzola. And now I know Barzola didn't get Aguilar down, but the point I'm trying to make is if Ige does get Aguilar down, he's not going to need 2, 3, 4 takedowns in a round, because I think if he gets him down once, he can control him, he can control the position. He did a great job against Jordan Griffin, who is a guy that I personally really like and I think is really talented. And like I say, his transitions, his grappling, his movement, and top control is very, very good. And I think Ige can steal a couple of rounds here. It wouldn't surprise me if he submitted Aguilar either. I know Aguilar, he's only been beaten once, and it was a knockout. He's never been submitted. He's never lost by decision. He has got a good record of 17-1. But I think that Dan Ige can get at him. I think he can hang with him on the feet, and I think as long as he disguises his takedowns and really works the entries, opposed to, like I say, shooting from far out and overly focusing on trying to take Aguilar down, I think he can have some success. So I do think Dan Ige gets takedowns. I do think he can win rounds. Although I could see a submission, I am going to take Dan Ige to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And now we move on to the parlay piece. So this week, as Andrew is our guest, we've decided to pick one piece each and create a unanimous parlay. And the first parlay piece of the card is Bryan Barberena. Now, Bryan Barberena is fighting Randy Brown. I know a lot of people are high on Barberena in this fight, and I totally agree with it. I think that his last fight against Luque speaks volumes of where he's at. It was an absolute war. If you've not watched that fight, go and watch that fight. Bryan Barberena and Luque just threw down. They were standing right in front of each other. And do you know what? I was surprised how many shots Barberena took. I know he got knocked out eventually, right at the end of the fight. But man, he was taking some shots that we've seen Luque dead people with. And I honestly think there's an argument that Bryan Barberena was winning the entire fight until he got knocked down as well. The fight was super close, and Luque is a guy that obviously we're all high on. We all know how good he is, and Bryan Barberena matched him. And I think on the opposite side of the coin with Randy Brown, he's got height, he's got reach, he's long. He has got an athletic build, but I just don't think that his skills there or there right now. Maybe there is room to develop, but right now, going from what I've seen on tape, I can't picture him winning this fight. And I know this is mixed martial arts and anything can happen, but I feel that stylistically, even though he's got huge height and reach over Barberena, like I've mentioned with John Lineker, he'll be able to walk through any shots that Brown's throwing. He'll be able to close the distance. I think when Brown's on his back foot, and if Barberena can back him up against the cage, I think that's where Brown is a little bit uncomfortable, and I think that's where Barberena can really flourish. Again, back him up to the cage, land shots on him, maybe try and mix in a couple of takedowns as well. He does have to be careful because Randy Brown will throw up arm bars and triangles and the rubber guard from his back. So I wouldn't advise, if I was going to advise, I wouldn't advise Barberena to stay in guard for so long. But if you can pass guard and work, or just take him down and stand up just to mix it up, I think that Barberena's got all the tools he needs to beat somebody like Randy Brown. And if you can mix in leg kicks as well, we saw what Bilal Muhammad did to Randy Brown. He was really hitting them legs early. And fair play to Randy Brown, he was taking a lot of them. We didn't really see him, stumble, or we didn't really see him hobbling from the damage that he took on those leg kicks. But Barberena's really got to mix it up, and as long as Barberena just doesn't allow Brown to dictate the pace of the fight and dictate the reach and the range, the striking battle, I can't see Brown winning this fight. I think Barberena is probably going to get hit quite a bit coming forward, but once he is coming forward and he's landing devastating shots, and he's the one in the judge's eyes looking great, and the one that's pressuring and dominating the cage, I just think that that's his route to victory. And I think if it goes to a decision, I think the judges are going to see that Barberena's got the more volume, as being the one pressing the majority of the fight. But ultimately, I can see Barberena knocking Randy Brown out. Now, let's not forget Randy Brown got knocked out whilst Nico Price was on his back on bottom, and he got hammer-fisted. Man, don't really know what to say about that. It was surprising. It's the first time I've ever seen a fighter knocked out whilst they're on top, with the guy throwing strikes from bottom. So it was a bit crazy to see. So I do wonder where that chin's at. Barberena can fucking crack. So I genuinely think Barberena's going to close the distance. He's going to get Brown backed up against the cage at some points in this fight, and I think he's just going to be unleashing strikes. I think one of those strikes is going to knock Randy Brown out. So I've got Bryan Barberena to win. He's my piece of the parlay piece. I think he's going to win by knockout. Andrew, who have you got in that fight, man?
I've got Bryan Barberena too. One thing I want to point out about Bryan Barberena is if you look at his losses, they're to guys like Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, and most recently Vicente Luque. So his losses all come to the top of the division, and he's really hard to finish. He's durable, and I definitely think he should win here. But I do think it should be noted that he's fought the much harder strength of schedule than Randy Brown.
And now we move on to the next parlay piece. So this one's yours, Andrew. You've picked Luis Pena. Obviously, Luis Pena is fighting the returning Matt Wyman wherever this dude's been. So enlighten us, man. Why have you got Pena?
So to put it really simply, Matt Wyman has not fought since 2014. So for those keeping count, that's 5 years ago. And even when he was fighting, he was very inactive. He only fought once in 2012. He fought once in 2013. He fought once in 2014. I think his Luis Pena's first pro fight was after Matt Wyman's most recent fight. So I just tend to favor guys whose opponents are coming off super long layoffs, and I don't even know if I've seen as long a layoff as this one, as other than Chuck Liddell coming back for Tito Ortiz, but that's like a special situation. But I think Luis Pena's solid. He beat Steven Peterson in his last fight. Even though he missed weight, he won pretty handedly. And his only loss is a split decision to Mike Trizano, who I'm actually pretty high on. He has a guillotine win over Richie Smallin, and I actually got him at a pretty good price too. He's sitting at about minus 370 right now. I think I got him at minus 260, which I'm pretty comfortable on. But yeah, I don't know how you expect to come back after this long off and expect to come right back into the mix at UFC level.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pena's going to win as well. And the one thing I just want to mention straight away is I'm glad that he's made the move back up to lightweight, because fighting at featherweight was just no good. We all foresaw him missing weight. He was saying he was fine, but he missed weight still anyway, and by quite a bit as well. He cuts a lot of weight to make lightweight, and he's still a big lightweight as well. So I like that he's made this move back, and the matchup itself is just strange because, like you've mentioned, Matt Wyman's had such a long time off, and you just don't know what he's going to be like. But you can make the educated guess that he is going to be a little bit rusty. But we don't know what he's been doing in his time away, man. Has he still been training? Did he just completely wipe MMA off the board and now he's decided to come back? And we've just got absolutely no idea. But what I do know is he's had such a long layoff. Pena's been active. Matt Wyman will probably try and come out here. He'll probably get outstruck. I think Pena will be the faster fighter. I think his movement's slightly more elusive. I think he'll just be mixing it up on the feet. I think Wyman will probably try and level change, try and get Pena down, try and put Pena on his back. But I think Pena's good in the scrambles. I think that he is difficult to take down and keep down. And like I say, we just don't know. Is Wyman's cardio going to be absolutely shot? Has he got around him? Has he got 2 rounds in him? Can he go 15 minutes? There's just so many questions, but ultimately, not only are they questions, they're red flags. So for me, I have to favour Pena, and I think he's going to get the job done. I actually think that if Wyman does start struggling on the feet and tries to take him down, I think he could end up in a really bad position on the mat after a scramble, and I think Luis Pena could submit him. So I've got Luis Pena to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And now it's time for the dogfight, and we believe the best underdog on the card is Alessio Di Chirico. Now Alessio Di Chirico is fighting Kevin Holland, a fan favourite, a guy that likes to talk inside the cage. Now, Andrew, you're really confident on this one, so talk to us, man.
So I understand why Kevin Holland's the favorite. He has a lot of athletic tools, but in my mind, other than Thiago Santos, a fight which he lost, he was pretty much controlled in that fight. He hasn't fought the best of competition. He went to a split decision with Gerald Mearshart, and he had a rear naked choke win over John Phillips. Those are his 3 UFC fights, and I think Kevin Holland, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I don't think he has the best fight IQ. He's submission over position, and he's bad takedown defense. So all those things considered, Alessio Di Chirico has pretty decent takedowns. He's competent on the feet. He throws a nice left kick to the body. I think Holland's a better striker, although I do think Di Chirico could hold his own. And I also think he's the better fight IQ here. He's 3-2 in the UFC. His most recent fight was a year ago. Over the summer against Julian Marquez, which he won a split decision. And when I was watching that fight, I just couldn't help but notice how big Julian Marquez is, and it didn't seem to bother Di Chirico too much. I can only assume he's gotten better in this past year. I know he's been training hard. I think I don't blame anyone for taking anything better than plus 150 on Di Chirico. It's almost even just a fade of Kevin Holland's fight IQ, his submission over position, and his bad takedown defense.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a weird one for me, and it's actually the first time I've done this on the podcast. So although I absolutely agree, because there's also not many underdogs on this card that I do feel that have got a massive ton of value, I'm actually picking Kevin Holland to win this fight, and I think he is going to win. However, you know, sometimes when you're gambling and when you're betting and you're handicapping, you've got to play the line sometimes. Like you've said, Andrew, I don't blame anybody that's taking Di Chirico at these odds. Again, it has to be a fade on Kevin Holland. He's got skills, he's got the tools to get the job done. He's athletic, he's got cardio. He can fight on the mat. He's good striking, but it's that fight IQ, and you've touched upon it as well, Andrew. It's the fight IQ, it's the mistakes he makes in the fights. You've got so many question marks on him because you don't know what he's going to do. And in that GM3 fight with Gerald Mearshart, the amount of times that he had a good position on top and then just threw it away, or the amount of times where he was doing well on the feet and decided to accept going to the mat, and it's like he's just a really, really strange fighter to get a read on, because he's got all the tools, he's got all the skills, but it's the decisions that he makes inside the cage which leave huge question marks on him. And on the opposite side, Di Chirico, he's the type of fighter, what you see is what you get. He won't make too many mistakes. He is fundamentally sound both on the feet and on the mat. It took Julian Marquez down 3 or 4 times in that fight. As you mentioned as well, Marquez was the bigger dude. Still managed to get him down. He was landing on Marquez. He did drop a round against him, but like I say, his fundamentals are there. His striking's decent, his grappling's decent, and I just feel that if Kevin Holland does make mistakes in this fight, Di Chirico will absolutely take advantage of them, because he is a fundamentally sound fighter all around in all disciplines of mixed martial arts. However, I still feel that Kevin Holland is elusive. He's got elusive movement. He's got strikes that are coming from weird angles. I just think as long as he doesn't make too many mistakes, I think he should win this fight. If Di Chirico goes in for the takedown, tries to take Holland down, Holland can stand back up and he can throw submissions off bottom. He can sweep and reverse. He can also defend takedowns as well. So, it might even hit the mat if Di Chirico does want to try and take him down. But I just think the elusiveness of Kevin Holland, the unorthodox striking style he's got, I think it could be enough to throw Di Chirico off. And for that reason, I am taking Kevin Holland to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And with the breakdowns complete, we'll now enter the quick fire round. And first up in the quick fire round is Andrea Lee versus Montana De La Rosa. Andrew, who have you got?
I've got Andrea Lee here. I've been impressed with her fights in the past, and I think that she has good enough striking and takedown defense to keep this one on the feet. And because Montana De La Rosa is a former wrestler, she's going to try to get takedowns in this fight. She has submissions on her record, but I think KGB Lee is going to be good enough on the feet to pretty much make this a clear decision. I can see it being a 30-27. I don't think she'll give up many takedowns, but even if she gives up one or two, I think she's pretty good at getting back to her feet. And I think her advantage standing is going to be too much.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that De La Rosa may land a takedown or two throughout the fight, but I don't think it's going to be anything significant. I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. I think Andrea Lee is a slightly better striker than De La Rosa. I think she's better in the clinch. She's got a good Muay Thai. I think she's going to land more volume over the three fights. Like I say, I feel the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet opposed to being on the mat. And I think Andrea Lee gets a dominant decision as well. So I'm going with Andrea Lee. I'm going to take her to win via decision. Now in the next quick fire fight, we've got Ashley Yoder versus Syuri Kondo. Andrew, who have you got?
I think I'm going to take a nap during this fight on fight day. But in all seriousness, I think I favor Ashley Yoder a little bit here, but I'm not confident. I thought she lost her last fight against Amanda Bobby Cooper, which would have been 4 losses in a row for her, which probably would have got her cut, but she got the split decision. Good for her. On the other hand, Syuri Kondo is one of those fighters who's just going to start swinging and not really use much technique. I remember her first fight in the UFC against Chanmi Jion. I hope I said that right. They just started throwing with no defense whatsoever and just throwing big sloppy punches. But when she stepped up in competition, she lost both of her fights. She got TKO'd from a body kick against Poliana Botelho last summer. I remember I bet Poliana in that fight at a pretty good price. And then she got pretty much dominated by Yannick Sohn. And this is one of those WMMA fights that I'm sure I might feel Yoder has a tiny advantage technique-wise, but it's nothing that jumps out to me that's screaming that one girl's going to win this fight over the other.
Yeah, I like Yoder in this fight, and I actually disagree with a couple of points you made. I thought she did beat ABC in her last fight. It was a close fight though, but I think that the reason Ashley Yoder wins this fight is I just think she's more well-rounded. So Kondo, obviously, people know that she was a pro wrestler, so think that she's got this wrestling background. But apparently, a character or whatever it is in the pro wrestling was a karate-style fighter, which is predominantly a background. So she is predominantly a striker. I think Ashley Yoder is going to be able to take this fight to the mat, and she's really tricky to deal with as well when she's on the mat. She's really scrambly, her positioning's really good, and I think she's going to finish her as well. And a lot of people are going to be shocked at that, but I just feel that with Kondo's background and her experience, I just don't think she's going to be well versed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as what Yoder is, and I think Yoder's going to be too much for it if she does take her down. On the feet, striking, I do give Yoder a slight advantage, but like I say, I think the biggest gap in skill is going to be on the mat. I think Yoder does get her down, and I think she does submit her. So I've got Ashley Yoder to win. I'm going to take her to win via submission. And in the next quick fire fight, we've got Alan Crowder versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Andrew, who have you got?
This is really the people's main event, huh?
For sure.
So I was actually at Alan Crowder's last fight against Greg Hardy, and he did a lot better than most of us thought. He ended up winning by disqualification, but he was looking to. It looked like he was taking over. He was started to take over the fight at that point. He got a couple takedowns. He showed that he could eat some of Hardy's shots. And the fight before that, he got knocked out by Justin Willis, which Justin Willis is a pretty tough striker. He's even though he got cut from the UFC recently, I think he still was right around like a top 15, top 20 heavyweight. On the other side, Rozenstruik, he's 7-0. He's coming off a head kick knockout over Junior Albini. I remember Albini actually took him down, which is a pretty smart game plan because I think Rozenstruik comes from a kickboxing background. I know he had a lot of pro kickboxing fights. And then but he actually stayed calm on the ground and was able to last the round, which was impressive. And then he came right out and very early in the second round landed a head kick here. So I think Alan Crowder's best path to victory is by getting takedowns and top control here. But I think that Rozenstruik is definitely the better striker on the feet, and I could see Rozenstruik getting a knockout here. But it's also tough to say because Alan Crowder has shown to be pretty durable against Greg Hardy.
Yeah, and I don't actually think that Crowder gets enough credit for actually eating some of them shots that Greg Hardy hit him with, because he did hit him with one or two really, really hard shots that we all thought at the time that one of them would drop him or put him out. But yeah, it's gonna be very, very tough if. It's going to be a tough night for Crowder if he tries to stay striking with Rozenstruik, because the dude's an absolute monster and he's got 60 plus knockouts in kickboxing. He's training with Hard Knocks 365 with Henry Hooft. So, man, he's in the exact place that he needs to be right now, Rozenstruik, and I do favour him to win this fight. Now, the one worry is obviously him getting taken down, Crowder pursuing the takedown like he did with Greg Hardy. He seems to have that decent level of fight IQ where if he knows he's going to be outmatched on the feet, either via technique or via power, he will opt to use his wrestling. He has been working with wrestlers as well. But Albini attempted 6 takedowns on Rozenstruik and only got him down twice. So it's not as if Rozenstruik can't defend a takedown. He can defend a takedown. He just looked a little like a fish out of water off his back, shall we say, which is to be expected when he's got such an advanced kickboxing background. But I think the biggest gap in skill in this fight, I keep mentioning biggest gap of skills because I do think they're important when you're looking at analysing a fight, and the biggest gap in skill in this fight is absolutely on the feet. Rozenstruik is a complete monster on the feet compared to Alan Crowder. If Alan Crowder's getting knocked out by fighters like Justin Willis, Rozenstruik is 100% a more advanced striker than Justin Willis. So looking from that perspective, I do think Rozenstruik's got a huge advantage in this fight. He's just got to keep the fight standing. All fights start standing. I'm going to take Rozenstruik to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. Now in the next quickfire fight, we've got Ariane Lipski versus Molly McCann. Andrew, who have you got?
So I got to admit that I got burned on Ariane Lipski in her last fight against Joanne Calderwood. I fell for the hype. And not to say that she was overhyped, but I think I was overestimating some of her wins on the regional scene and underestimating Joanne Calderwood's complete game. It was on the same card that Greg Hardy fought Alan Crowder, so I saw this one live too. Watch my money burn. But I do like Lipski to win here. I think her opening price, actually, I didn't play it, but I would have if I was more prepared at the time. But I think she sat around minus 145, minus 155 for a day or two, which would have been a nice line. She's all the way down to minus 280. No offense to Molly McCann, but I don't think too highly of her. She fought one of the lowest level MMA, WMMA strawweights in her last fight and made it very close. I'm talking about Priscilla Cachoeira. I think it ended up being 29-28 on all the scorecards. If you remember, Molly McCann had that busted up eye. I think Lipski's going to piece her up on the feet here. I don't think Molly McCann possesses the same takedown and ground threat that Joanne Calderwood did. And I think this is a step down in competition for Lipski and a step up in competition for McCann.
Yeah, and it's interesting, a couple of things that you mentioned there. First of all, that closed eye from Molly McCann, how that fight was not stopped, I will still never know.
Same.
And on the other side of what you've said as well is the betting line. I think the betting line is too high for this fight. I do favour Lipski. I do think she's going to win. She's going to have to weather a storm in that first round because McCann will come out hard. She will come out fast, and it would be smart of Lipski if she did level change and and put McCann on a back, because Lipski has got a decent ground game. We just don't see it too much, and we didn't see it so much in the Calderwood fight, because Jojo is good on the ground as well. But I think Lipski's got a huge advantage over McCann on the mat. So if McCann does come forward really hard, really aggressive, really fast, just level change, take her down, get her down to the mat, and just relieve some of that pressure on yourself. The longer the fight goes on, the more I favour Lipski anyway. I think Lipski is the better technical striker. She's just got to use her movement, use footwork, use angles, and she'll frustrate Molly McCann. So I don't see too many issues for Lipski in this fight to beat Molly McCann, but I do think the line is slightly off. You know, heading up towards minus 300. I'm not too sure about that, but I've got Lipski to win, and I'm going to take her to win via decision. Now, in the next quick fire fight, and this is another short notice fight, we've got Deron Winn, who's supposed to have fought Marcus Perez, then he's supposed to have fought Bruno Silva. Now he's fighting the returning Eric Spicely. Andrew, who have you got?
So this is an interesting matchup because Deron Winn's a very good wrestler, but he's inexperienced in MMA. He's 5-0. I bet on him in his last fight against Tom Lawler, which he won a unanimous decision. And this is a very different matchup from the fight he was supposed to have, because Bruno Silva was his prior opponent to this, who's predominantly a striker. But Spicely, most of his wins come by submission. He has submission wins over Thiago Santos, who's challenging John Jones for the title next month, and he's a submission win over Alessio Di Chirico, who's also on this card. But he also has his fair share of losses too. He's a submission loss to Antonio Carlos Jr. He's a TKO loss to Gerald Mearshart and a TKO loss to Darren Stewart. One thing I will say is his striking has gotten better over his career. Even though he got cut from the UFC, I thought he was doing a better job in the striking department, and he wasn't as much sub or bust, which he might have been back in the day. But it's going to be interesting because Deron Winn's a really good wrestler, but he probably isn't too well versed in jiu-jitsu. And Eric Spicely being a black belt, it'll be interesting to see if Deron Winn wants to take this to the mat or make this a striking battle. As you guys may or may not know, Deron Winn's one of the shortest middleweights of all time. I think he's like 5'5" or something like that.
Yeah, he's 5'5".
Yeah, and so he's no matter who he fights at middleweight, he's going to have a significant reach advantage and a significant height disadvantage and a significant height disadvantage too. But it's also interesting, another thing you have to take into account is how in shape Eric Spicely is. He's on short notice. How's he going to perform here? So I don't know. I think I might favor Spicely to win this one, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny as well you mentioned the height of Winn, because he's only 2 inches taller than John Lineker. So just let that set in. The amount of times that we break down a John Lineker fight and say, oh, the dude's always had a massive height and reach disadvantage all of his career. Every time he goes in the cage, he knows he's going to be shorter. Winn's fighting at 185 pounds, and he's only 2 inches taller than John Lineker. So he's a massive disadvantage for him in this fight. Spicely's 6'2", so there's 9 inches of height advantage for Eric Spicely, which is absolutely massive. But you know, Winn is a really good wrestler, multi-time state champion wrestler who's an Olympic hopeful as well. He'd been to the trials, and so he's a very high level wrestler, and it's always tough to back against a high level wrestler in MMA because we just know how dominant they are. And he is starting to improve his striking. He is Daniel Cormier's protege. He is at AKA, so he's got everything around him that he needs to develop and progress. But the bottom line is he's 5-0, and I still think that he's really green. Now, he's got to close this distance on Spicely because, like you've already mentioned, Andrew, Spicely has improved his striking very slightly. He's looking a lot better. He got cut by the UFC. He got 2 first-round TKOs outside of the UFC. So his striking is improving. He is looking more comfortable there. Winn has got to close this distance, otherwise he'll just lose on the feet on the outside because Spicely's just got such a height and reach advantage over him, and likely leg reach as well. So he's got to close the distance. He's got to try and get in on Spicely. Now, with Winn being a wrestler, he's not the worst thing in the world that he's so much shorter because he is going to be closer to the hips. but the elevation, the lift on the takedowns is also going to be tough as well. And like you've mentioned, I think the biggest thing in this fight is if this fight hits the mat, whether Winn's on top or whether Winn's on bottom, because Spicer can score a trip takedown and put Winn on his back. I don't think his jiu-jitsu is going to be anywhere close to Eric Spicer is. So for that reason, I am favouring Eric Spicer to win this fight. I do think the fight hits the mat at some point, whether I'm not sure who's going to be on top or bottom, but either way, I think Spicer is going to be able to find a submission. So I'm going to favour Eric Spicer in this fight, and I'm going to take him to win via submission.
Real quick, if I could just make one more point about Deron Winn and wrestling in general. If you guys don't know me, I wrestled for 16 years, so I like to think I know a thing or two about it. When I bet on wrestlers, I like to bet on wrestlers who are going out there to wrestle. So if you're betting on a Gregor Gillespie fight or a Kamaru Usman fight, you know they're going out there and they're going right for takedowns. When I watched Deron Winn fight Tom Lawler, I don't think he shot until like the second or third round, and he... It wasn't a very convincing fight. So although Deron Winn is a high-level wrestler, when you pick a high-level wrestler to win, you want to be sure they're going out there to wrestle, because in the past there has been plenty of examples of wrestlers who fell in love with their hands. But I just wanted to make that point real quick, that if you're a gambler and you want to bet on a high-level wrestler or any wrestler at all, make sure they're going in there to wrestle. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good point to make. Now, you've got to think to yourself, though, that with this being Winn's UFC debut, he's not going to want to take an L. Well, no fighter ever wants to take an L, but the last thing that Winn wants is hype on him going into the UFC on his debut and then taking an L and not utilising his main strength. With him being around guys like Daniel Cormier, aka, I do find it hard to believe that Winn won't be in there to wrestle, especially after he sees the height that Spicer's got on him. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Andrew. Even though his last fight he didn't shoot right away, I do expect to see Winn shooting in this fight and trying to take the man that's got a huge height and reach advantage down to the mat and hopefully work his top game. So, but we'll see. Moving in to the final quick fire fight, we've got Andrea Ewell versus Anderson dos Santos. Andrew, who have you got?
Okay, so this betting line opened up at a ridiculous price. Andre Ewell opened up at like minus 300, and Anderson dos Santos was like minus 225, and it actually got bet in Andre Ewell's favor a little bit, and I actually hit Anderson dos Santos at plus 240, which is a crazy price. I think Anderson dos Santos is miles better than Andre Ewell on the ground. Ewell's a good long striker, but Anderson dos Santos is pretty competent on the feet too. He had a tough matchup with Nad Narimani, and I actually don't think he looked bad at all. He has some decent wins on his record. He's a win over Ricky Simone, who I think pretty highly of. He's fought Said Nurmagomedov, so he's fought some decent guys, and I think him having 11 submissions on his record and Andre Ewell looking like a fish off his back, he better know the goal here. I hope he doesn't stand on the feet and mess around too long. Being an Anderson dos Santos backer here, I want him to go right after takedowns, and I think if he gets us to the mat, I think he has a very high chance of finishing it. Andre Ewell, when he's been on his back in the past, he doesn't have much of a get-up game. He doesn't have any submissions off his back, and he kind of is just trying to hold on defensively. So I very comfortably picked Anderson dos Santos at plus 240, and I think now the betting line being close to a pick'em, I still favor dos Santos here. I think he wins this fight.
Yeah, the opening line. I mean, some people in the UK got plus 250 on dos Santos, so it was absolutely nuts that Andre Ewell opened at minus 300, because I just don't think he warranted that betting line at all. But like you mentioned, it has closed up now a lot. It's a pick'em, and I do favour Andre Ewell in this fight. Now I know Anderson dos Santos has got such an advantage on the mat, as you've already mentioned, Andrew. A lot of submission wins. Andre Ewell has, again, against Ward in previous fights, shown not a great get-up game. He does seem to be comfortable. Well, not comfortable, but content to stay on his back and keep his opponent in full guard. You know, it doesn't make any sense why fighters do that, but that's what we've seen on tape, and that's the big worry for Andrea Ewell, for anyone picking or betting Andrea Ewell. That is a huge concern. But the main thing for me with Anderson dos Santos is what you've just said about Deron Winn, and how when you bet a wrestler, you need to know that wrestler is going to come in and try to wrestle. Similar to dos Santos, you bet dos Santos to try and submit Ewell, because that's where dos Santos is really going to flourish and really going to dominate the fight. But you just don't see him shooting too many takedowns. Yes, he shot an early one against Said Nurmagomedov, and he did subsequently get finished shortly after that. But you don't really see him shooting too many takedowns, and this is the worry. He stays striking with Ewell. If he's fell in love with his striking and he just wants to scrap, wants to come in and throw hands, I think this is Ewell's game all day long. He's the longer fighter, a little bit taller. He's got a bit of a reach advantage as well, and I think he's just a more patient striker. So as Anderson dos Santos is coming forward, I do think Ewell can stick that jab out, hit 1-2s, and just really start piecing dos Santos up. If dos Santos does want to take him down, because Ewell's not that easy to take down. The reason Wood made it look very easy is because he was aggressively pressuring him, and that's how you take Ewell off his game. Come forward, get in his face, throw combinations, really get him thinking about defensively, his defensive striking, then level change and take him down to the mat, and that's what Wood mixed in so well. But you look at the Renan Barão fight. Renan Barão, yeah, he did get him down in that first round, but after that he wasn't anywhere near aggressive enough to find the entries and the holes that Ewell was leaving to try and take him down. So I just don't think even though Anderson dos Santos can be aggressive, I just don't think he's got that aggressive pressure streak in him than what someone like Nathaniel Wood's got. So I do find it hard to see him taking down Ewell easily, and if he doesn't get the first 1 or 2 takedowns, I think dos Santos will bail on it and try and strike with him, and again, I think that favours Ewell. Ultimately, like I say, it's going to be a close fight, and if dos Santos does get him down, he's going to have a huge advantage, but I do think the fight is won and lost on the feet in this one, and I am favouring Andrea Ewell because of that. So I'm going to take Andrea Ewell to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And that is it for this week's podcast, guys. So, Andrew, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really had a good time. I appreciate it. If you guys want to check me out, my Twitter is @betsandpicksMMA. My website's MMAknockoutbets.com. And like you knew like we did today, I also host a MMA weekly podcast. I break down the cards from a betting perspective and from like a general perspective, and that's called Fishing for a Fight, which is also on my Twitter. But thanks again for having me. I really had a good time.
No, the pleasure's all mine, man. Thank you for coming on. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find my MMA betting section, which will provide written betting advice for some of the fights that are in the quickfire round in this podcast. You'll also find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, and the content collaboration with Heavy Duty Fight Management too. You can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. The next mention is for MMA Play 365, which I spoke about at the start of the podcast. MMA Play 365 is a brand new betting advice platform that is launching next month, and we believe it's going to be a very popular platform with the content that we'll be offering for any type of gambler. So whether you're in it for the long term or whether you just want some fun bets while watching the fights on fight night, the goal is to make money, and that's what we'll be doing for you. Follow MMA Play 365 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to make sure you don't miss our launch offer that will be rolling out very soon. And the final mention is the long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, which is CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too. And at CBD Life UK, they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to also get 15% off your order. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, and we'll see you next week.